we certainly choose each other for self-awareness and consciousness and intelligence. And I don't, if you're choosing a mate, there's an arms race in human beings. We're choosing intelligent mates, that's especially the case for women in relationship to men. So that the idea that that's a choice, well, that's partly why it's Eve that makes Adam self-conscious in the Garden of Eden, right? She offers him the apple. She's the one that makes him self-conscious. And I think that's actually accurate, because the evidence from the evolutionary biologists is that female sexual selection was one of the driving factors that differentiated us from chimpanzees. It's a major factor. Chimpanzee females are not selective maters. They go into estrus. They'll mate with anything. What happens is the dominant males chase the subordinate males away, and so they end up leaving more offspring. But it's not a consequence of selection on the part of the females. In human beings, it's completely different. Concealed ovulation and intense selection pressure from women on men. You have twice as many female ancestors as you have male ancestors. And people can never have a hard time working that out arithmetically, but it's not that problematic. You just think, on average, every woman had one child. Half of men had none, and the other half had two. And that's approximately correct if you average across the entire history of human sexuality. So human males in particular are subject to vicious selection pressure on the part of females, and I also think that's partly why nature is represented symbolically as female among human beings, because after all, nature is what selects. There's no better definition of nature than that which selects. Now imagine that there's a set of qualities that makes it more probable that you'll get to the top of a dominance hierarchy. Now, that's not that hard to imagine, right? You might think, well, intelligence might have something to do with that. Attractiveness might have something to do with that. Power. We know from studies of chimps, this is mostly done by Franz de Waal, that, because you might think of a kind of prototypical caveman society, that it's like the caveman that looks most like a bodybuilder who's the most dominant caveman, but so to speak. But what de Waal found among the chimps was that the chimp who was at the top of the male dominance hierarchy, who remained at the top relatively stably so that he wasn't brutally murdered, say, by two chimps that were below him in the dominance hierarchy, was actually kind of a good leader in some sense, So he got along well with the females in the troop and maybe even attended to their children to some degree, and he wasn't a completely unpredictable tyrant. And if he was like that, then, a couple of male chimps would form a coalition, and when his back was turned at any moment, then they'd rip him to pieces. And so that's really phenomenally interesting, because what it suggests is that there's a stable set of characteristics, relatively stable, that are operative within a dominance hierarchy that propels you to the top. And that's characteristic not only of human dominance hierarchies, but it's also characteristic in a way that's analogous to even chimp dominance hierarchies. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting idea, right? There's a set of stable traits that propels you towards the top. And some of those would be indicators of biological health, like symmetry and beauty. And some of them would be, well, what other characteristics the rest of the bloody troop think are admirable. And because admirable is also a very interesting phenomenon, right? Because there are people you admire. You think, well, why are there people that you admire? And what does it mean to admire someone? And what it means in some sense is that the effect they have on you is one of wanting to imitate. And, human beings, a lot of our knowledge, a tremendous amount of our knowledge, isn't propagated linguistically, it's propagated through imitation. And the probability that we were imitating each other before we developed language is extremely high. And we're also one of the few animals, maybe the only animal, that are really capable of true imitation. And it's a major league advance in terms of the transformation of information, because what it means is you can go out there and half kill yourself learning how to do something and stumble back into the tribe and recover, and then I can just watch you and embody what you did, and poof, I've got the damn information, and I didn't have to expose myself to dragons and all sorts of other horrible things that were out there in the unknown. And so, we're imitating ourselves all the time. So if you admire someone, what that does is it hooks into your desire to imitate. And that's also part of an inbuilt intrinsic biological process. Okay, now, fine. So here's what we're going to say. Dominance hierarchy. Reason for getting to the top. That produces admiration. partly because people want to be at the top of a dominance hierarchy. That's success. And we're wired to climb dominance hierarchies, because if you live at the top of a dominance hierarchy, you live longer than you do if you live at the bottom of a dominance hierarchy. Even if you factor out the effect of relative income, it's less stressful at the top. You have better resources at the top, and the top is a place, right? Because it's been around for 400 million years. It's a place. It's like a conceptual place in a sense, or it's a place that's the emergent property of social organization, but it's a place. And it's a place where people want to go. Okay, you got a dominance hierarchy. Someone gets to the top, you admire them. All right. But that's not exactly what human beings are like. First of all, there isn't one dominance hierarchy. There's hundreds of the bloody things, especially as society becomes complex. There's a radically variegated realm of dominance hierarchies, right? And so, then you might ask yourself, across the set of dominance hierarchies, is there a set of properties that makes people likely to get to the top? And that's the kind of question that only a creature capable of abstraction could ask or posit. And I would say that the figure that represents the properties that produces the highest probability of climbing to the top of the set of all dominance hierarchies is a messianic figure. That's what a messianic figure is. So, and it's a kind of abstraction. It says, because of course, obviously a messianic figure is an ideal, right? Clearly. And so then you might think, well, an ideal in relationship to what? Well, he generally is the perfect person. Well, how would we come up with the concept of what constitutes perfect? Think about it as a biological category. Well, there's hardly anything more perfect than the ability to climb to the top of whatever dominance hierarchy you happen to be put in. Now, one of the things I would say is that women exerted tremendous selection pressure on men to be exactly that sort of creature. So, and I can tell you a little bit of experimental evidence that we have in relationship to that later. Unfortunately, it was an unpublished study because it was an undergraduate thesis, but what the hell else would women select men for?